Thank you very much. I have to start with the first basis, and I know some as superintendents, principals, have a different kind of mixed view on the issue of No Child Left Behind, but I'm not a big fan of it. I don't think we need to move forward and put it aside and bring more control back into local governments, local communities with parents and teachers. I don't believe that policy set at the federal level and dictated down to local communities is the most successful if you want to have education to be successful in the communities. And I know there's mixed views on that. I think the premise of No Child Left Behind, the act itself of accessible education for all and accountability are very good goals, no question about it. But the problem is, everywhere you look now, everyone wants flexibility, they want revisions to it, they want amendments to it. What that tells you is the act is not working all across this country. And so the better approach, in my view, is bringing those resources right into to the communities. When this law was passed, it's now created a $70 billion funding gap. So as the senators and congressmen pass this legislation, they never put the resources to it, but then they dictate down to the local communities to deal with it, which really means the local communities have to pick up the tab for a law that we'd rather have local control over. The other issue, so if the law is not eliminated and the resources moved to local communities, then obviously flexibility is what we want to see. But I have to tell you, I have real heartburn over it because it doesn't address the core issue, and that is letting local communities direct the right kind of education. But when you pass a law like that and then you don't fund it properly, the end result is we all pay for it sooner or later. The other thing with education, I'm a big fan of pre-K. I think across this country we should have voluntary universal pre-K. There's no data that tells us otherwise, except one thing, that the more resources we put into kids in those early years, 0 to 5, the net result is they're going to be successful in our education system. Head Start has not had the funding they needed, they've been flat funded, and then on the back end of it, if you're fortunate enough to be able to afford preschool, you can do it, but there's a huge gap in between that we need to ensure that we have pre-K available for them.
Thank you, Mark. Don?
You know, I introduced 648 with your help. That's a bill that's been written by the school administrators, principals. They supported the NEA. They don't support me, but by the way, I want you to understand that. But the reality is that's a good bill. Mark mentioned the fact that they want to do away with it. He's dreaming. This is the brainchild, not of George Bush. It's really George Miller's. And he is going to, in fact, insist this bill stay in place. So having said that, 648 solves most of the problems. Not the funding problem, which is absolutely correct. And I think that is the fault of the Congress. We have to make sure the funding does, in fact, is available for our communities. But my bill gives flexibility. It also allows teachers not to required to have all degrees in what they teach. And imagine our small rural schools. The present law, as you know, if we have one student of a class of 20 that doesn't quite reach the margin it should be to pass, the whole class fails. If 2 students drop out, it fails. And so I'm saying that's wrong. So it does give the flexibility for the communities and the state to try to apply it, leave no child behind. I'm a supporter of testing. I always have been. I believe you should test the 2nd grade, 4th grade, 6th grade, and 8th grade, sophomore, and senior. It's unfair to test a senior if he hasn't been tested before. I want to do that for the student, so the student knows where they are. That's crucially important. One of the most discouraging things I've seen is the student that leaves one of my rural schools as a valedictorian to go to university and cannot compete. That's unfair to the student. So I would suggest that part of it, and my bill's a good bill, and I'd say get behind it. Everybody else is. We're going to get it done if George allows it to happen.
Thank you, Don. Bob?
I am the uncandidate for politics is unusual. Right now I feel like an iguana on a hot rock because I'm going to actually show you the Constitution of the United States, which every one of these candidates are sworn to uphold. There is positively, absolutely no warrant for federal funding for education in that document. And I can prove it 6 ways from Sunday. It is the Democratic and the Republican parties that have brought you the monster of No Child Left Behind. In 1979, when it was passed, it was predicted this was going to happen. And Ronald Reagan won 44 out of 50 states in 1980 and 49 out of 50 states in 1984, promising to eradicate that. And yet now we find the Republican Party being Me Too, and a choice, not a choice, but an echo of the Democratic Party. I hope you saw my quarter-page ad in today's Anchorage Daily News, because you will see two cars racing for the cliff of socialism. That is what the Republican and Democratic parties offer you. I offer you authentic change, and that goes back to the very roots of what this country and what this Constitution is about. You cannot violate that Constitution. The 10th Amendment tells you, and it's well amply displayed in the Federalist number 45, the powers are few and defined. You cannot expect a bureaucrat to tell you how an Alaskan Native village education should be done. And yet that's exactly what they're trying to do. And so I'm telling you, if you really love the kids, and I look in their eyes every single day, and I see that we are being brought to rack and ruin by not obeying the Constitution. It does take science. There's no argument whether it should be loosely or strictly interpreted. The 9th tells you to be loosely interpreted for our civil liberties, and the 10th strictly interpreted for federal power. You must understand, I am running because I am going to try and end this socialist matrix, which is not only destroying our economy, but also our students.
Thank you, Bob. Second question, we'll start with Mark Begich. Currently, private school voucher programs have been enacted in 9 states and the District of Columbia as one tool to increase student achievement. What is your belief regarding the role vouchers might play in student achievement for our public school students?
I do not believe in the vouchers. When you look at the Anchorage school system here and the introduction of charter schools, publicly funded charter schools, and the variety that it gives, I think it's been very successful in a lot of ways. I'm a product of the alternative school here, Stellar Secondary School. I think public education ensures equal access for everybody, no matter where and who they are. I think that's the trend, and that is the right thing to do. I think when you go to the voucher, what they're basically saying is, well, the system's broken, let's not fix it, let's just move it out and create a new system. I think an example I always will give is the Anchorage school system as a product of it. My son right now goes to the German immersion school. Again, a charter school, publicly funded. I think it's the right way and the right approach. And when you look at the variety that we have in this school system here, I think it's incredible. When you hear, I talk to military families that come here for their 2 years, what do they talk about? The education capacity of this state, and I use Anchorage as the mayor of Anchorage. They talk about the variety of education options they have here that are publicly funded. And I think that's the right approach. I think the voucher system would destroy our public education system, and the competition that we create within our own, again, through the charter system, alternative schools. And in Anchorage, you've got kind of a whole variety from ABC schools, science schools. You have the, as I said, the German immersion program my son's going to. I think that's the right approach. And I think Alaska has some great examples to share with the rest of the country of how to do it right.
Thank you, Don.
Parliamentary inquiry. What's our time frame on the answers?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. I just want to make sure of that because I don't like to rush through it.